This video contains content and images that some people may find distressing. Lessons learned and opportunities for improvement.
I think from my perspective, when you're receiving bad news, really bad news, it's not really the specific words that you necessarily pick up. It's the intent that the other person has for you. So I don't remember the exact words, but the overwhelming feeling that I got from Diane on that day was that everything was going to be okay. And no one else could have given me that message. When I think we're designing things about people delivering bad news, we really need to understand that's what the receiver is going to be seeing in the words, is actually that intent. And it really made a huge difference, I think, for me about how I could start that journey of acceptance.
Matthew's healthcare team would talk to Diane and the children about how Matthew was doing, improvements he was making, and involve them in his care.
Medical staff would sit there, they would bring up scans on their phone and show our kids what was happening, to show positives, allowed them to suction Matthew's mouth out.
My tracheotomy, yeah.
And
down my throat. So they were involved, really.
Yeah, they were involved in every way that they could be. Nursing staff would sit there and as they come in from school every day, they'd be like, how was school? It was not a quiet ICU environment when we were there, but nobody ever seemed to worry about it for us. Our kids felt fully involved, and then when Matthew moved from ICU to rehab, the involvement was exceptional again.
I don't know if there were rules broken, but they were.
I think they probably were.
They were really flexible, and it made all the difference.
Matthew ended up spending about 9 months in hospital. Being able to stay connected to his children gave him the drive he needed during his recovery.
When I got to rehab, there was a fairly big room, and it had one of those beds that pulls out of the wall for a visitor to be able to sleep in. It was a double bed. So we hatched this plan to see if the 3 boys could sleep in that bed overnight with me on a Friday night. We had a chat to the nursing staff during the day, and had a chat to the doctor, and he was great. He said, look, the more kids we have in here, the better. The age in a rehab facility is pretty high, and he wanted to kind of lighten up the place and get a bit of joy happening. So he thought that was a fantastic idea. So we just executed. The kids had been dropped off. The 3 boys could all fit in the double bed. And then it was probably about 4:30, 5 o'clock. Somebody had forgot to actually inform the director of nursing. So that she came in, Diane was no longer around. The kids had already been dropped off. I told her the plan, and she said, who's looking after the kids? And there am I, lying in bed with no arms and legs, not able to move. And I just turned to her and said, I am. So she then she looked at me, and she knew me pretty well by this stage, and she just went, okay, and then walked out. So I think somebody might have got in trouble, but that happened every week. So they would come for Friday night.
And the boys would look forward to that. And they ended up being on a roster system as to who could have a sleepover. And it was the highlight for them of probably the whole experience, because they had movies on demand. Food was delivered directly to them.
They had a great time. Then on the Saturday morning, after they had the sleepover, they'd come down to the rehabilitation gym with me. And you got everybody trying to, get around, and we're on the floor trying to play soccer and rolling around and wrestling and stuff like that. It made it so much more important for me to get better. It gave me a huge drive to make that difference.
Matthew recalls a time when he was supported by his medical team to push the boundaries to aid his recovery.
I think one of the other really important things for me in the way that the hospital approached my recovery was the ability to take risks in hospital. It's much more important to take risks where you have a support mechanism to deal with things that go wrong. Because if you don't do it in hospital, you're going to do it at home. So, for example, falls prevention. I am quite a falls risk, but I also need to do cardio activity. And we were really struggling to work out, how do I actually get cardio, a bit of exercise and core strength back up again? So an example of that, we decided that a trampoline would probably be a bit of a good idea. So As you can imagine, with my no arms and legs jumping up on a trampoline, the falls risk kind of escalates a little bit more. But that's an environment to do it in. So we worked out, how do we do it? What kind of matting do I need around me to make sure if I do fall that I'm going to be okay?
You had a helmet on.
Yeah. And as it turned out, I fell. So my head hit the side of a wall and I slid down onto the mat. I was perfectly fine. The risk was managed well. And that's probably an extreme example, but there are lots of others where I was able to take those risks, to find those boundaries. Because if you don't know where those boundaries are, then you're probably not trying hard enough.
Yes.
So how do you do that in an environment where it's well supported and those risks are well managed?
Reflecting on what happened in the lead up to being admitted to hospital, Matthew says there were a number of occasions when his illness could have been diagnosed.
So the core thing for me is that there were multiple opportunities to intervene, and in my view there was facts there that were able to be read. They may not have said this is exactly what the diagnosis is, but there was an alternate there.
Find out more about sepsis on the Te Tahu Hauora Health Quality and Safety Commission website, hqsc.govt.nz.